Anthony Arnaud. Please join me in welcoming Michel Gondry and Noam Chomsky to the stage. They turn on your lav mic? Yeah, lav mic's on. Oh, I think we gotta get a little bit more mic going on here. 1 second, everyone. Bear with us. And do a mic for no. Great. Beautiful. So first of all, Michel, I want to thank you. I just think this is a really, truly remarkable film, and it's a real gift. I think, in a way, a work of art really can genuinely be a gift. And I also think you've done a remarkable thing in that I've known Noam around 26 or 27 years. I was able to get into a film once in that entire 27-year period. You've now managed to get him to see this film twice in less than a year. So I think that's also a remarkable gift to Noam and to the world, to drag him away from the computer for a few hours and get him out and to bring him here with us. So I want to thank you for that as well, Michel. I wonder if you could start by talking, this process started 2005, and what the germ of it was for you, and then a bit of what the journey was to being here today.
Well, I met with Noam actually, 2005, because I was visiting MIT as an artist in residence. That was organized by Michel Oshima, who's here. And I realized that Noam was, I guess, still teaching there at the time, and I was visiting a lot of students and teachers to see all the programs, and because there is this work that's been done there, and that's really bridging between art and science, which is a territory that I always was interested by. So I met with Noam, and
that you're dealing with in your work, or in a particular aporia currently.
Currently?
Yeah.
Well, the point that Michel emphasized correctly is, and at least has been a driving force to me, not for everyone in the field, is to try to show what ought to be true, try to demonstrate what ought to be true. It ought to be true for various reasons, some of which indicated in the film, that the basic, essential nature of language is, first of all, uniform for all languages, which is why children can learn any of them, and is also fundamentally very simple. That when you look at the data of language, it looks extremely complex. But that's true of anything you don't understand. If there's anything you don't understand, it looks hopelessly complex. The idea is to try to see if you can extricate from the complexity fundamental principles which somehow make things fall into place, which otherwise didn't make any sense, like the one principle that was mentioned at the end of the film about seeking minimal structural distance. You can pursue that much farther, and a lot of things fall into place, including the way in which quite complex sentences are interpreted, if you continue to pursue the idea that there just has to be fundamentally simple processes that interplay in a way which yields observed complexity. So that's the basic work that I'm involved in, just that one paper coming out, another one's a lot of technical questions about this.
Michel, I think there's a very interesting theme that runs throughout the film, and I wonder if it doesn't also speak to your other films. As I read them, I feel like there's a fundamental curiosity that drives your work, and what Noam refers to as a puzzlement, looking at things that might appear to be obvious, but being puzzled by them. I wonder if that is something that you think of in your own practice, and if it might apply not just to this film, but to your earlier work as well.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I always, like any kid, ask many questions to my parents, and they always ask why, and at some point they get tired of it, and you have to figure out somehow yourself. So there is some thing that I remember figuring out by just my questioning, my own questioning, and sometimes I would verify the answer, but I always have this curiosity to understand what was going on with the world. And when I was a kid, Catholicism didn't work. We went to some cult and had some. My mother took me to some meetings that were really weird, and it didn't satisfy me. And I found in science some more constructive answer. That the idea that you can build something on the ground that people agreed upon. It's one of the things that attracted to Noam's work and philosophy. It's this idea that you, like French philosophers, they say, "Oh, everything is up in the air and it's foggy and it's very abstract." And I think it's important that you can try to agree on the ground, so you can build on. So in my movies, I mean, it's not necessarily apparent, but I always had this curiosity.
And could you, I'd actually like to ask both of you about this, the difference between kind of the process of self-education and your formal schooling, because it seems like both of you have engaged in a process of learning outside of, or that went beyond the period of formal education. And, you know, in your case, maybe you could start, Michel, talking about art school and your experience.
It's going out, I think, in 10, gradually to 10 screens, and hopefully it's going to go bigger. I mean, I don't have any sense of how much it can reach. I never know in advance, but what I'm thinking is I maybe do a contribution, and it could last. And in a few years, people will learn about it. It will still be going on. I remember the first time when I showed the first half of the film to you, Noam, you said basically at the end of I showed it to you on my computer, as you see in the film. And you say, "Okay, I agree with it." Basically, you're saying that you agreed with yourself, which is great. And to me, I understand what you meant. Basically, it meant that, and I was very happy about it. It meant that you had not distorted what you were saying. But then you added, but it's going to take few more generations for people to accept that, talking about still about generative grammar and the whole conception of the referential assumption, for instance. And I was telling you, so you're not upset that you won't be here to witness that? And you said, no, I don't care about that. What I care is like maybe nobody will be here because of the climate change and all the risk. And I think it's. I really wanted to add that at the end, but I didn't do it. But I think it summarizes Noam's priorities.
So there are some audience mics, and I think there's some people coming around, and there's time for just a couple quick questions. Maybe starting right there with a hat.
How you doing? Thank you both for your work. Let me say, Noam, you went to a Deweyan school, and you talk about John Dewey often, or at least I see it online. I read about it. You, in many ways, whether you'd like to own that or not, are modern day Dewey as like a leading social philosopher. I come from blue collar background, and now I'm a Columbia student, and I often get, argument that we can no longer have these radical critiques because we're now part of this co-signing, contributing, co-opted entity that's usurping proper education and indoctrination. How do you reconcile the two, being inside the system, part of the system, but also trying to change it and not be co-opted?
It's always been first of all, my own impression over 75 years of activism is that the level of energy and dedication and commitment, especially on part of young people today, is as high as anything I can remember, outside of maybe a few very brief peaks, like maybe 1968, 69. But it's quite substantial. But you're right that there are very intensive pressures to try to beat it back. You used the phrase indoctrination. That's actually the phrase that's used at the liberal end of the spectrum by those who were deeply concerned about the activism, independence, courage, great contributions of young people of the 60s who really civilized the society. Right after that, there was a reaction, and across the spectrum at the sort of liberal end, the Trilateral Commission, that's basically the Carter liberals, they staffed the Carter administration, a very important book which called for trying to introduce what they called more moderation in democracy, less participation. People should become more passive and obedient and apathetic, and as one Harvard professor there put it, and maybe we can get back to the good old days when Truman was able to run the country with the help of a few Wall Street lawyers and financiers. That would be democracy. But one of the things they emphasized was what they saw the failure of the institutions, I'm quoting, responsible for the indoctrination of the young. Schools, universities, churches, they were not indoctrinating the young properly. So therefore we have to do more to indoctrinate the young. And there's been quite since that time, there's been quite a campaign from kindergarten to universities in many different ways to try to impose discipline, obedience, apathy, atomization, keep people separate from one another, all kinds of things. Those of you of that age have all been through it, but you can struggle against it. And plenty of people are doing it, and there's a lot that has been done, a lot more can be done. And I think what you mentioned is a problem, but I don't think it's a paradox. You can we do live within the society. We can't pretend we live somewhere else. You can live within the institutions and work hard to change them.
Okay, we have time for one more question. A woman would be great. Yes, right there and back. Beautiful. Can someone bring a mic to the woman right there in the middle? Thank you.
Hi. First of all, it was really enjoyable, and you guys are such a great combination. I'm a huge fan of both of you. My question was for Noam about death. So when I think about death, or when I think about life, really, because I don't really think about death, I think that the thing that is alive in me is not behind my eyes, and it's something that's bigger than anything that I could ever possibly imagine. So when you say this spark of, how did you put it? This spark of consciousness goes, if you wanted to convince me that, the way that you see it, like from dust to dust and then nothing happens, how would you explain that? Is that a question? How would you explain to me where that spark of consciousness goes?
Well, actually, that was my 10-year-old self. I did used to have nightmares about the idea that when I die, there is a spark of consciousness which basically creates the world. Is the world going to disappear if this spark of consciousness disappears? And how do I know it won't? how do I know there's anything there except what I'm conscious of? So if this spark disappears, it's all gone. Later, when I got older, I thought that this is a rather classical concern, and a lot of thought and writing and agony and so on about it. But as you get older, you just realize, look, that's not true. The world's going to go on. Your children will be alive, your grandchildren, your friends, other people's children, the children of those villagers in Colombia who you saw there, and so on. And the world will go on. It'll go on without me, but okay, it went on for a long time without me. And a lot of it goes on without me, and that'll continue to happen. It just seems like, to me at least, seems like less and less of a problem as you get older. It becomes easy to understand why this is really not something to be concerned about. My personal feeling.
What makes you think that you'll be gone?
Well, on that very cheerful note, everyone, thank you to Michel Gondry, to Noam Chomsky, and to DocNYC for an amazing week of programming.